Live from Miami, Florida.
I am Linda.
And I am Bella.
And this is our podcast, Mostly Peaceful Latinas, where every week we will discuss current events, politics, pop culture,
and everything else related to the state of the clown world. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mostly Peaceful Latinas. I'm your host, Bella.
And I'm Linda. Hi.
Hi. Don't forget, guys, before we even get started, to subscribe, share, and like our content.
Our video, most specifically this one, help us with...
Spread the word.
Yes, spread the word. Please rate us also on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and on Spotify.
Thank you. So,
what do we have today?
I'm so excited. Because today we're going to talk about El Príncipe.
El Príncipe.
El Presi.
El
Presi. Bukele.
Mr. Nayib Bukele.
Mr. Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador.
So if you guys follow me, which I'm sure most of you follow both of us, you know that I absolutely adore Presidente Nayib Bukele of El Salvador.
For a plethora of reasons where we had to dedicate an entire episode
on this man
to really give you guys, and I think that, you know, being the Latino perspective, right, which is that we're tapped into what's going on in our native countries, right, and giving people
Latin America
this perspective where it's like most of our viewership doesn't have access to what's going on in Latin America other than the warped view of what mainstream media offers you. So we want to do a little introduction onto who is this guy that every time we post him, he goes viral. People love his content. They love his stuff. He's based as
super based,
right? Continues to call out the American. How can one man be this based? And he looks like
hottie.
This.
He's a hottie.
Can we discuss?
He's a little habibi.
A little man. He's
habibi.
Just, how can one man be so base? So where do we start? I mean, first of all, Linda, you introduced me to Bukele and you're like, you got to follow this base man. And I'm like, more based than Bolsonaro? And you're like, more based than Bolsonaro.
Real based.
Real based.
So, you know, I'll go over a couple of facts about our príncipe, Mr. Nayib Bukele. So Mr. Bukele was elected in 2019. And he was elected under the promise to tackle gang violence, which El Salvador has been under basically a hostile takeover by gangs for the last 30 years, probably up to, I don't know, until he got elected, one of the most dangerous countries in Latin America and in the world.
Some of the most notorious and dangerous gangs in the world,
right?
Even violent gangs known here in the States.
MS-13 come from El Salvador, so he was elected under the promise to tackle this rampant gang violence that takes place in El Salvador, and tackle political corruption. And he won more votes than all other candidates that ran against him.
Significantly more.
Significantly. Another super important fact is that he actually ended a 30-year bipartisan rule by the leftist party of El Salvador and also the right-wing party. So his party, called Nuevas Ideas, it translates to New Ideas, is actually like the third option that completely destroyed both the left and right-wing establishment in El Salvador that was holding this country captive for the last 30 years. What the America First candidate ends up being here in the States. Right. So he also has one of the highest approval ratings in the world, 70 to 80% in the world. He's also the youngest leader. He's 40 years old right now, but when he started, he was younger than that. One of the youngest leaders in the world, presidents in the world. 70 to 80% approval rating. Even the opposition's party's media has to acknowledge that the people love him. That the people love him. So this is something really interesting, which is that the American media hates him. Oh, of course, because he is the Latino Trump. He is the disruptor. He's the populist. Correct. Nuevas Ideas, his party, is actually a populist party, a populist movement. And they actually won 56 seats in the parliament, in El Salvador's parliament, out of 84. So they
Like
hold
their own red
the
wave
majority.
of sorts,
They
if
had
you will.
They had a Bukele wave of Nuevas Ideas, and they completely took over parliament. And this is why his opponents have accused him of having like an authoritarian regime or tendencies, and express concern that the supermajority in parliament would undermine El Salvador's separation of power and its system of checks and balances. So extremely controversial. Everything that he's done, I mean, this is all legal, right? It's not like he took over and then he all of a sudden put 54 seats or 54 people in the seats.
Like people were elected.
Correct. And this is a problem with the American Biden or the Biden regime, with the American media, which is that they do not, they want to undermine his presidency by saying that he's an authoritarian, that having the majority of parliament is a problem, which is actually what the American left and right want to do. Like, literally, we're going to have
want their party to take over so that they can have a majority.
Right. Take over the legislative branch so they can pass their agenda. So there's no reason for the American media or the American public or the American Biden regime to sit here and say that this guy or his party shouldn't have majority of the legislative branch to pass his agenda.
Particularly not when, you know, the proof is in the pudding, and this guy has already made a significant difference. So I think that crime has gone
down
in El Salvador within his first year in presidency by something like over 50%.
Right.
You know,
very tough on crime.
Extremely tough. I mean,
tough on crime.
This is some of the content that he has that goes most viral is how unapologetic he is about, I don't care what humanitarian causes come for me.
I don't care what the globalists say.
These people are evil, dangerous individuals. Right. We talked about this quickly before the podcast. You know, for a very long time, American media had a large majority of liberal. I mean, there's still liberals out there that believe that Donald Trump really did say when he said they're not sending their best and there's rapists and there's murderers, that he was somehow speaking about the entire Latino demographic population
of Latin America.
That comment is very specific to the MS-13 Salvatrucha gangs that come out of El Salvador, and how detrimental they were to not just El Salvador, but then how they were weaponized, how these gangs were weaponized through an open border,
right,
to allow them in to create havoc. And this is something the Democrats defended. We've gotten to the absurdity where the Democrats will defend the MS-13 and Bukele's treatment of these dangerous gang members.
And Trump's treatment.
And Trump's,
because
absolutely.
Their entire meltdown over this MS-13 gangs. And there was even like Nancy Pelosi memes of her like welcoming in like a refugee or like an illegal, and it's actually like an MS-13 gang member. I like clearly remember reposting this during the Trump era, is that they always take the side of the most horrific individuals on planet Earth.
And then put them up on a pedestal.
Right.
And then what they'll do is that they'll get the media and they'll be like, oh, the innocent children and women crossing the border. And they're not showing you this absolute criminal that will cut your tongue out of your throat if you give him an opportunity to. So he is notoriously, and you know that I just came back from a trip in El Salvador where, of course.
So that was one of the things that I convinced Bella to do.
Where are you going?
I was like, you know, when El Salvador, it's got to be a place that people travel to this year. The guy doesn't have any of the mandates.
You don't even need to have a negative test to get into El Salvador.
You don't need to have a negative test to get in. No mask mandates, no V mandates. He's been very vocal about it on Twitter, actually. He did a post about it, like, you know, in El Salvador, we don't have any of these things, whatever. Obviously, he's made the vaccine available to the public. Like, he's been very, at the beginning of the pandemic, he was very tough on the lockdowns.
This is kind of how he earned his way with Donald Trump, and where the relationship comes in between them.
During the lockdowns, there was a little bit of controversy and pushback, because he was tough. He did lock down people.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why is because you're talking about a developing country, a very poor country with a crappy healthcare system that could potentially be very easily overwhelmed, or that was, not saying this as an excuse, this is just what he reported or what the El Salvadorian media was reporting. Believe it or not, though, his handling of the pandemic actually gave him even more of a higher ranking or made him even more popular. So we want to go through a couple of the controversies.
Like his most based moments, if you will, that end up being controversies. And I mean, you just said it perfectly before we got started. Like, this is exactly what the fringe majority that wanted tanks rolling down the street. Like, this is the hostile takeover.
I was like texting Bella. I was like, what he's doing right now, it's like what the Q-tards wanted to happen. Like, they just got the Q-tards were right, but they just got the wrong country.
How
it didn't happen here. It happened
living my dream
in El Salvador. So with that being said, one of the biggest controversies in the last year, this actually I think happened last summer, was when he had very strong opinions on abortion and gay marriage. So let me just tell you what he said.
Very strong opinions.
So number one controversy: Congress will not contain the criminalization of abortion, legalization of same-sex marriage, or steps to permit euthanasia. And this quote actually comes directly from his Facebook post. This is what Mr. Bukele said. He said, "I have decided to dispel any doubt not to propose any kind of reform to any items related to the right to life from the moment of conception, to marriage, keeping only the original design, a man and a woman, or to euthanasia, to use euthanasia." Right. So very controversial. You obviously had not just the American media, but all of this non-government organizations, as NGOs and this Human Rights Watch.
These have been his biggest enemies.
Right. Like all the international community is like, oh my God, like President Bukele, authoritarian, right-wing fascist, is, against gay marriage. And this is hurting the gay community and the trans community and all these things. And it's like, dude, you're talking about a very Catholic religious country. Very, very Catholic.
Correct.
Very,
like
very
most
religious,
of Latin America.
Most of Latin America. And he literally is a president, a populist president elected by the people, who's going to do what the people want. El Salvador is nowhere near as open-minded or as morally deranged as the U.S. They're just simply not.
We talk about this all the time. Latino culture does not mesh with crazy liberalism of that we see in America,
like the mafia stuff,
being anti-God, being anti-gender roles, pro-abortion. No, these are not things that any Latin America culture stands for, right? So of course he's controversial because he's taking a stand to again be a representative of the individuals in his country, and he's not bending a knee to the Soros organizations of the world and the WHO's of the world and anybody else that's tried to get involved, and they've tried bullying him every step of the way and undermining
his presidency
and not just in his Congress and the people that he has elected that have a right to represent the people. Watching it from the outside and watching the desperation of outside influence trying to come in, because just grasping at like, how could this guy win? How can he have a majority? Because again, everything he's done is legal. Everything he's done is legal.
You said, right?
Right.
Wikipedia had it.
Wikipedia has to report that he's a popular president and that he's loved by the majority. And from personal experience, going out there, every single person, I made it a point because it was a political trip to some degree. And every single person, what do you think about the new president? What do you think about Bukele?
You asked them?
Every single person talked about opportunities, about the crime going down, particularly in these areas. I know we're going to get into the Bitcoin topic, but what it's done to their economy, what it's done to, who the hell wanted to go visit El Salvador a couple of years ago?
Nobody.
It was one of the most dangerous places in all of Latin America to go visit to. And now they've created tourism, which creates jobs, which boosts the economy. And now these people that were living in dangerous poverty have an opportunity, and they're so well aware that it's because of him that it's happening.
Right.
So it's interesting to see him being loved by his country and
while
hated.
the international community is having these meltdowns, I actually have a friend who lives there, and I was asking him earlier, and I said, can you give us like the top 5 to 6 points that we should cover on this podcast. And, you know, one of the things that he said is that he's like the Trump, like draining the swamp, arresting the gang members, arresting corrupt judges. We're going to get into all this stuff. His second controversy, and by the way, this is not an order of like which was more controversial. It's just what we were writing down. Him and obviously Parliament, they are creating a law which is going to ban foreign donations or funding for non-governmental organizations that supposedly carry out political activity in El Salvador.
Give us an example of these organizations.
So I'll give you an example of these organizations. We can talk about Open Society Foundations, and actually...
Oh, gee, I've heard that name before.
So our friend George Soros, which has his dirty hands and everything in the world.
Every hashtag that is aligned with a cause that's like, oh, the children, oh, the poor prisoners, oh, anything that makes you go, oh, with a hashtag usually is fabricated by George Soros or some other humanitarian billionaire behind, a nonprofit or an NGO.
So basically, what the law says, like under this law, other civic groups would have to report foreign donations and account them and pay 40% tax on them.
So do you mean like the donations that went to BLM?
Yes. So I actually read the whole law when I was posting about it on my Instagram, and I made a whole story about it. And they're very specific about the things that these organizations do. Like funding journalism, like let's say like the Vice News of the world, funding certain social programs, the pro-abortion stuff, the LGBT, I'm sure over there is like indigenous rights, right? Correct. So all of those organizations which are foreign, bringing money into this country
under the pretense of humanitarianism,
right? They are going to be taxed 40%. Okay. You have somebody from the opposition party. His name is Congressman Cesar Reyes of the Conservative Arena Party. He said the intention of the bill is to undermine our democracy and place chains on the civic groups that defend the rule of law. Yeah. It's, this is not the only country that we've seen take certain measures to protect their culture and their nation from these organizations like Open Society. Russia did it with, kicking out Open Society's foundation as a foreign threat, as a threat to their...
Open Society infiltrates every aspect of a country's society. So it starts off in the media and then goes into the schools and into the universities. And then what does it do? It pumps money into art programs that, people living in poverty want to join, only to then insert social justice into these programs. So they specifically target countries where there's poverty and lack, and then bring in their fancy money with these programs and these things, and then insert their social justice bullshit into it in order to have control, which is why so often we see that these movements are born out of, cultural programs in universities. I remember in SOS Cuba, it was the artist with the white rose out of his window. There's always kind of like that.
They find a way to subvert the culture and the nation every time, and he's taking care of its people. He obviously has not just the support of the people, but the support of the legislative branch to get these laws passed.
Such a badass.
All within the law, which is again hilarious considering how corrupt the Democrats are, that they're like having these fits.
They have this meltdown. Part of their meltdown, I just crack up because I thought the tweet was so funny. When he tweeted out to Congress and he's like, okay, boomers. He literally called our Congress boomers because they were on him about cryptocurrency, because they didn't. I would imagine that has a lot more to do with just the independence of making the choice to switch over to cryptocurrency.
Right. So we'll get into the cryptocurrency, but here as our number 3, controversy, and this has been going on through his entire presidency, but even more now, is how tough he is with these gangs. And the conditions that he has them in jails and what he does, the promotional video that he puts out, how he embarrasses them and stuff like that. And so I believe it was within the last month or so, let's say like 4 to 6 weeks, there was a rise in criminal activity and rise in deaths.
And organized. It was planned as a way of saying, you know, screw you, Bukele. We're going to show you that we could be more vicious with our ways. And his response was...
So these gangs are out there, they're murdering people. And he said, okay, no problem. So he enacts martial law, gets it approved by Congress. He basically kind of not shuts down the country because they put out, not just him, but, you know, they put out a statement saying like, you know, people can resume to work, you can go to school. However, in these specific areas or sectors of the country, things are going to work a little bit different because we're going to be cleaning house. So the Salvadoran army comes in. They're going after these gang members. They're putting them in jail. They're making insane laws saying like, you know, for the head of a gang, it's going to be like 30 years in prison. And then the other ones are this many years. And they're saying, we're going to have no mercy with you guys. In fact, there was this video that you posted that going viral right now of him saying that let yourself be arrested because at least in jail, you're going to have like
some food.
He said no chicken.
No chicken.
He said no pollo.
No chicken. No pollo.
No chicken. There'll be no chicken for you.
Right. He's like, you're going to get some rice, but don't expect chicken. Yeah. But you're better off in jail. He's like, stop avoiding it. Don't avoiding it. It's going to happen. You're going to get arrested because it was almost like a threat where it's like, if you continue to arrest us, we're just going to get more violent. And he's like, okay, well, if you get more violent, then I'm going to starve the prisoners that we already have. We're gonna starve your homeboys. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna feed them one rice.
Oh, that's right. He calls them homeboys.
He calls them
so
homeboys.
Funny.
He's so based. He's like, I'm not gonna feed your homeboys not one rice if you guys go off on your crime wave that you're trying to plan out. And how many arrests has he had since giving out that?
He's had. Let me get the right number. So in 24 days, he's had 13,573 gang members arrested.
Can you imagine? These are people that could cross our border at any given time.
Right.
At any
extremely
given time.
Violent. I mean, the crimes that they do are just abhorrent. Like there's no other way.
But we've had very sad crimes here in the States
by these gang members that we allow to come in through our open borders. Some of them even claim refugee status, dude.
They do.
That's why they have to check them. A lot of times you see your CBP checking for tattoos to see if they are identifying them. You know, you mentioned about the homeboys, which is what he calls the gang members. And he recently tweeted, because obviously the international community, like Human Rights Watch and all these other organizations were concerned over the humanitarian, the treatment of these prisoners, and this is against human rights and all these things. You know, the same people that were cheering for lockdowns and mandatory,
all the crime that they always do.
Right. So he then goes on Twitter and says, okay, well, we have started an Adopt a Homeboy program for international community where you're welcome to get these gang members to your country, house them, bathe them, feed them. There you go. Here's your Adopt Homeboy program.
He said it on the speech. He's like, he's like, you guys want to complain about them not getting rice? You come get them 2 for 1. It was 2 for 1. He said, come get the gang members. 2 base.
Yeah. So, you know, during the Trump administration, he was extremely friendly, and he was cooperating with Trump to weaken illegal immigration, because obviously they have to go through there to come here, you know, blah, 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 Mexico, etc. And he also made a deal with Trump where before we were holding these MS-13 gang members at our prisons, and then Trump said, no, what we're going to do is get these gang members and bust them down and take them down to El Salvador. And he agreed. So they had an amazing and really good relationship to the point when COVID happened. El Salvador, obviously, again, developing country, didn't have all the resources that they needed to combat the pandemic. And one of the things that he asked Trump was for a certain number of ventilators. I can't remember the exact number right now. And Trump said, hey, listen, I can't really give you, let's say, like 600 ventilators. I can give you 250. And then he's explained to him, you know, negotiating X, Y, and Z. Point is that Trump actually ends up committing and giving him all the ventilators that he needed because he was such a good partner to the Trump administration in combating these gang members and also the illegal immigration problem that we have,
Yeah.
So another thing that happened during the pandemic was that he used those lockdowns to crack down on these gangs, not just what's happening now, also during 2020. And again, once again, the liberal media, like I have a headline here. I'll pull it up. It says El Salvador orders army into the streets after spike in killings. And what does the
article
media says is that for some reason now they're concerned over human rights abuses and lack of rights against the people of El Salvador. Do you see the hypocrisy here? So while we're locked down here, they're not concerned. They're screaming and cheering for mandatory everything, for don't go outside, don't hug your parents, wear 3 masks, wear this, do that.
Goggles.
And now when this guy uses the lockdowns to crack down on the spike of crime and go after gang members where everybody's locked down in their homes, what a better time. The international community has a problem with that. And I just want to pull up a couple of images. I want to pull up this image right here. This is what the President Bukele's draconian measures look like in a jail. You can see all the prisoners literally like on top of each other. You see them masked up. You see them in pretty insane conditions, chained up. But hey, it is what it is.
These are vicious criminals that rape and kill women and children with no mercy in very gruesome,
disgusting ways. Here's a quote by a lady that actually the liberal media decided to quote her, and this is what she says. She says, they're villains, they're murderers, they steal a little bit of money, the little bit of money that we have. I'm religious, but I don't care what they do to them. They deserve it. So again, there are people support these measures that somehow, some way bother the international community so much that they're willing to side with these gang members.
We just had 5 gang. I believe that the case comes out of New York or Jersey.
On MS-13, there's a lot of going on in New York and Jersey.
It's like one particular case where 5 defendants were just found guilty of murder charges for basically killing somebody with machetes. Machetes. This is like third world shit. This is crazy.
Well, that's part of like their gang initiation.
Right.
Back in 2019, I actually wrote, it was like a thread on Twitter that I posted on my Wake Up with Linda Instagram about this gang in LA, this MS-13 gang of very young males and basically
very young males. Some under the age of 18, they recruit them when they're children.
Correct. So a lot of these they're called unaccompanied alien children. So these are children that are underage that come to our border, and we actually have to take them in as like refugees and do this whole process. A lot of these young adults coming to the border, young males, will actually be recruited by MS-13 here in the United States, which is extremely dangerous to all of us.
Absolutely.
So
I was just reading you the story how back in 2020, under the Trump administration, they were able to label the MS-13 gang members as terrorists. No, but it helps.
But get this. Because the liberal media doesn't know what to do to taint this man's image and to just hurt him in any way, first they go into Bukele is an authoritarian with draconian measures who keeps all these prisoners in jail during COVID, whatever, like this whole headline. But then they accuse him of working with MS-13. So they don't know what to do. First, they show all these images of MS-13 in jail. The lack of human rights. Right. And then this is not working. Now we're going to accuse him with no proof, with no paper trail, with nothing. I guess they're like, sources, and saying that he was working with the MS-13 to fake the numbers. whatever. They literally don't
anything
know.
that they can do to discredit what it is that's going on, particularly when you realize that for the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, the Democrats greatly defended MS-13 and fought for rights of MS-13 and to keep them here and not have them be affected by immigration laws. And, it kind of makes you wonder, like, what's the gig, right? Like, what is beneficial for the Democrats to want to protect these gang members so much? What's the gig? Like, why want to bring violence in through the border? And I mean,
Yeah, they do it under the disguise of this country is built by immigrants and diversity is your greatest strength and all their little propaganda terms.
Right, make things really dangerous so that then you are forced to ask big government for help to deal with the issue, and then they create the problem and then offer you a solution that usually means stripping you of your rights to some degree in order to protect yourself.
Yeah. So this is probably one of my favorite controversies from Mr. Bukele, which is that once he gains control of parliament, he has the majority of the seats in parliament. They actually legally remove all the Supreme Court justices, magistrados, which is what they call them there, from
it's like Supreme a QAnon Court. Dream.
Right, literally. And so here we have a tweet from Kamala Harris, and she says, "We have deep concerns about El Salvador's democracy," out of all people. "In the light of the National Assembly's vote to remove constitutional court judges, an independent judiciary is critical to a healthy democracy and to a strong economy." So once again, you have someone like Kamala Harris, who was polling at 1% when she tried to run for president. She didn't even have 5% approval. Nobody liked her. She's only in that position because they just placed her there with Biden.
You're a woman of color.
Right.
You're not even.
So they're talking about a president that actually has 80% approval amongst his people, and that is making a lot of progress in a very poor, unstable, dangerous, developing country. And she is concerned that they constitutionally and legally removed all these corrupt judges, which, by the way, they've already placed, or they have some of these mayors, some of these judges in jail. Again, the QAnon dream.
Okay, the QAnon dream. Everything that
literally.
You're living my dream, El Salvador.
Yeah. So there was a recent case of a judge, and he was accused of raping like a 9-year-old a few years back. Point of the story is that he's in jail now. There was also
cleaning the entire thing up, and that's why it's a bit, because then
right.
I'm sure that to some degree, imagine the things that we don't see behind the scenes, right?
Absolutely.
Like how many of these corrupt people were bought by foreign nations, foreign organizations, things that have nothing to do with the benefit of El Salvador or pushing El Salvador forward. And now here comes in Bukele and says, none of this is going to fly anymore. So now what it's doing is that it's also cutting the lines of connection between the globalist state and their infiltration of this nation that had basically been running amok with crime and corruption.
And here are some of the responses from people from El Salvador, the responses to Kamala Harris. Ready? Ready to what they have to say? Here's a girl, and she says, "For 30 years, El Salvador was submerged in misery, crime, and lack of opportunities. What did the U.S. do about it? Did you make sure that the aid went directly to the people? A new age has begun where the majority of the Salvadorian people are happy. Please respect." Here's another one. "When El Salvador was known as the most dangerous country globally and we had a significant immigration influx, no one cared about us. Now that people have taken over, it's a democracy." Mrs. Kamala Harris, it's unfortunate that you have the option about the destitution of the judges, and you have that opinion about the destitution of the judges in El Salvador. We, the people from El Salvador, know exactly what's going on. Those are corrupt officials that have done a lot of damage to our country. I suggest you call our president for more comments. So a lot.
Imagine,
this was a whole thread of people.
Because imagine the
just
American
going
audacity.
At her.
Imagine.
Just going at her. This is the American privilege. She's not white, but this is the American privilege of them going to a smaller nation and saying, that's not the way you run a country. That's not the way you do. You got to do it like this. You need to accept our gay rights. You need to accept our feminists. You need to accept
our abortions and our killing babies and our bullshit. And
F you. We're gonna do what we want. We want it, and I think that is also why he has been so adamant and big on Bitcoin, which I'm not
a proponent of necessarily taking on a digital currency or not.
I'm not. I'm just.
We're not the expert here in that.
Exactly, but according to like what my friend says too, that he's an American living there. He says that, he made Bitcoin the legal tender, which will make the country sooner or later have an economic boom. The international community and central banks are pissed off because he's setting an example for the rest of Latin America to become economically independent, which, as we know, look at what happened to Gaddafi.
Right.
Right.
We don't want the globalist cabal system does not want independence, particularly these countries that have historically always defaulted to having to depend on globalist interference or American interference to be able to.
And that's why he went on his little rant of okay boomers on Twitter, because you have 2 Democrats and a Republican. So
correction, 2 Republicans and a Democrat.
Okay.
That voted on the legislature.
They're trying to pass. They wrote a bill.
They wrote a bill. And basically the bill is that in order for El Salvador to adopt this new tender that has been agreed upon by
Bitcoin,
their system, which is Bitcoin, that it could potentially have ramifications for the U.S. government, and it could potentially open up doors for crime and, corruption, and that they need to have a system in place that basically allows visibility to the American government.
So their whole thing, I read their explanation as to why they want to target El Salvador with Bitcoin, or for having Bitcoin as a legal tender, is because they believe that through Bitcoin, which it is true, you can have a lot of illegal transactions, human trafficking, drugs, whatever. They see that as a potential threat to our national security, which from, an outsider, I could see how that is a worry for American lawmakers. We do business with El Salvador. There is a lot of corruption coming from there, so I can see it. However, I don't trust my members of Congress from either party or senators to be doing this for good reasons versus them just trying to control a smaller country. You know what I mean? Like, I'm more willing to believe that they will do this to control El Salvador than because they actually care about national security. Because if they did, they would just close the border and stop illegal immigration.
Well, period. But that's not what it's about.
The army down there, National Guard.
It's about the stronghold, of being able to control, like the Americans have notoriously done all over the world for the last few decades.
Right. So right now, during this whole crackdown of the gangs and him arresting everybody in the international community, I believe it was Anthony Blinken. Who actually, I'm so disconnected from the creepy cabbage administration that I even have a hard time. Okay, so he is the Secretary of State. So our new Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, he just tweeted out, I think it was like last week, basically calling out El Salvador for what was going on with the gang members. And one of the newest things that our president, El Presi, had to say or wanted to do is that now he's targeting the woke journalists. Why is he targeting the woke journalists? Obviously, we're going to see out of the Western media how El Salvador and its authoritarian, fascist, evil dictator just hates journalists, wants to censor speech because he's a bad person, right? That's just the general what we're going to hear.
That's how the mainstream media is going to paint it, because of course any attack on them has to be painted as this guy has to be a bad guy because he's trying to shut us down.
Right. So now there's new laws, basically, that will punish journalists for spreading pro-gang propaganda. So this is what it says. Okay. Prohibido, so prohibited. Any spread of symbols and signs and messages from gangs. The other one is, or what you can do, right? Because this is the thing with journalists, is that they need to be explained like
5-year-olds. This is what we're going to allow you.
So you're not allowed to spread this, pro MS-13 symbolism, gang signs, whatever. But what is permitted is, so you can investigate. So you can investigate and you can do ethical journalism. And you can talk about how the gangs affect society, how it affects them and impacts their society overall. But what you cannot do is what the media has been doing, which is putting a favorable image of this
like
innocent,
sympathizing with the gang members, or the lack of humanitarian effort. And
so
how
you can talk about
stories.
their symbolism and their signs and the gang overall as an informative piece of media that will inform the public of how dangerous these gangs are.
But not an extension of a social justice cause. Like
Right.
the article I just read that described the killing murderer that oversees about 5 different gangs as a baby face 19-year-old
Yeah.
with so many hopes and dreams. It's like, no, we're not doing that. This guy's a cold-blooded killer that has quite literally macheted people to death.
Right. And my friend who lives there, he's obviously, he's very pro Bukele, and he's like, well, what we've seen is that journalists become spokespeople and the press secretary for these gangs inside of jails. Before Bukele became president, what would happen is that in these jails, just like they did in Colombia with Pablo Escobar, the jail was like a freaking house party. You had prostitutes coming in, you had cocaine, you had drinks, you had television, they got calls, they had iPads. I mean, it was like a 5-star stay in these jails. And then because you have corruption at the highest level, so they catch these people and like, don't worry, you'll stay in jail for a couple of years, but you still have your prostitutes come in, we'll still give you your drugs, you have alcohol, you have parties, you have this. Same situation that we had during Pablo Escobar when he had to go to jail, and it was like a house party every day. So this guy comes in, he says, no more of that. If you're in jail, you're going to be screwed, and you're going to feel like you are the criminal that you are. You're not going to have all these perks.
No TV. The first thing that he took out was the TV out of jails.
Right. So these journalists were the spokespeople of these gang members in jail, and now they're being punished. And this is how you are going to be punished. So, se castigará. He says, si lo que reproduce y transmite son mensajes o comunicación originados por grupos delincuentes. So basically, like if you're transmitting the messages from
on behalf of delinquents,
right, of delinquents, you're going to be punished, my friend. If you are generating panic in the public, or panic to the general public, you're going to be punished, my friend.
You mean like the digital number that ran on CNN for almost an entire year of all the people diagnosed with COVID?
If you use your role as an investigator or journalist to give a voice to the gang members,
you're done.
You're done. Que si en las publicaciones se hablará sobre crímenes o las formas en que se cometieron. So basically, if you're going to talk about the crimes on the way of they committed, I don't understand this one. Entraría como cómplice por no. Okay, so basically, if you are going to report on the crime that has already been committed, right?
And you do so in a pace that sympathizes
but you
with
don't
the gang
but
member.
you're not, if you know about it first and you're not alerting the police to catch these people, you're screwed, because you're basically an ally
and now an accomplice to it.
Correct. So
It's
very,
cracking down.
I mean, you know me, I'm all about punishing just journalists. I hate them, so I don't have a problem with them.
I mean,
Plus,
and irresponsible media
it's
is one of the
irresponsible.
biggest
It's irresponsible.
problems that we've had. You know, when we think about it, I think we talked about this on the last podcast. Like one
Yeah.
of the biggest issues that the world is seeing right now is the complete pandemonium
Yeah.
that an irresponsible press can create, specifically when they've got ulterior motives or because, you know, they're bought by somebody or they have a higher loyalty to an
Absolutely.
organization or an individual or whatnot.
So
When we see that there are, world leaders, we're not just seeing it with Bukele, we're seeing it, we saw it with Vladi as well. When you're seeing more of world leaders standing up against the press, it's because we have to be aware that the press is playing an extremely significant part in the detriment that we're seeing.
No accountability, which is
With
actually
none,
their favorite.
unchecked.
One of the last things that I'll mention about our based
Príncipe Bukele.
Hold up the picture for the
pri-
people. Hold up the picture for the people.
El Príncipe
El
Bukele.
Príncipe. So one of the last things that I'll mention is that I believe they're working on legislation to change the constitution of El Salvador to allow him to run a second term, which obviously, once again, the international community wants to make him seem like a dictator. And his response is like, wait, why does the U.S. president get to run for 2 consecutive terms, a total of 8 years, but somehow you guys think that I can't? If the people want to change the constitution, like many countries have,
Correct.
they can.
Correct.
Colombia tried to do it when we had Uribe. They tried to change the constitution, and the judges ended up striking that down. But at the end of the day, that's what people wanted.
It's again just the American audacity of thinking that you have a say, over more specifically, like you haven't said anything about El Salvador in years. Now you're concerned when they have a president that's actually making a difference. A president
for 30 years, these gangs ran rampant in the country. Illegal immigrant people don't have jobs. It's completely destroyed. I mean, and all of a sudden, when the right wing authoritarian comes in to bring law and order, to fix the country, the corruption, take out these judges, they have a problem.
Well, I mean, are we shocked that the Democrats have a problem with the takedown of violent gang members? No, not shocked. Not me. Not even a little bit.
No.
This is what they do, right? And it's, of course, there are going to be against this man that's trying to cut the head of the snake by solving the problem in El Salvador, where it comes from. Like, I don't want this problem to cross the border. This is our problem. We're going to take care of it.
I had a few followers. Like, I had this lady, like, a lot of times people that live outside of their home country, they just seem to think because they were born in a country or their parents are from there, they're just like, oh, I know because I'm Russian. I know because I'm Colombian. Like, dude,
I mean, we get it all the time.
Literally
here.
do not.
Like, oh,
like,
my
a lot of
family
you, right? Like, a lot of you, like, you'll be surprised that you are literally always on the wrong side when it comes to international politics. And
well, you and I have done the research that for both the SOS Cuba
and the SOS Colombia
Soros is all over that.
Right.
The
and
Open
our
Society
people
is all over that.
were marching with Antifa Colombians in downtown Miami.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, just because you're from there doesn't mean you know.
Yeah, you guys don't know, and it's the truth. None of us know. And again, it's the hashtag campaigns and
So I have a follower, and the other day he says just people say the stupidest things. He's like, oh, he went to rehab to Guatemala for cocaine. I'm like, okay, and you did cocaine with him? Is this how you know? Oh no, I just heard. Like somebody told me. And he's running this whole campaign based on social media, which he is really good on social media. He definitely knows what he's doing.
Oh, he's so good, but so is Trump. And that's what really set him
But when
apart.
you have the likes of Soros, the likes of Kamala Harris, of Hillary Clinton, of Anthony Blinken, of all these Democrats crying and complaining about you, but what you're doing, my love, you're doing something right.
Do more of it, please.
You're doing something right. So whatever, there's always going to be an opposition. Your family may be part of that 20% who opposes him. There's always going to be an opposition. Just like if somebody came from Guatemala and they asked, or Spain, and they asked the liberal about Trump, you may hear him say, oh, the worst president ever. He literally had children in cages. He hates women. He hates gays. And that person's like, holy crap. I went to the US and I spoke to his liberals, and they're like, Trump is like literally a fascist. So, you're going to get different perspectives. But overall, when you have an 80% approval rating.
That's unheard of.
It's unheard of. Well, Vladimir has it too.
Yeah. I
think he's at 70% right now because of the war. His popularity increased during the war.
The media won't tell you that.
The media won't tell you that. So, with that being said, we come to a conclusion of our
podcast dedicated
to El Presi.
To El Presi, El Príncipe. We have high hopes that someday we're going to get him on the show. We'll get to tell him to his face that he's amazing and that he's base as fuck, and that we hope he does more of it.
Right. Who knows? We may have land there. Like, we may retire. Like, we don't know. We could open up a kava bar there.
We could open up a kava bar / taco stand. We can do a lot of things out in El Salvador.
So
the beaches are great.
Absolutely. With that being said, please subscribe, like, and share.
And find us on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to give us a rating there as well, so that we can climb the ladder and get our voice out.
Thank you so much for tuning in once again, and we hope to see you soon.
See you guys next week.